Welcome to the Urgency of Awareness podcast. I'm Jody Farr.
And I'm your girl, Nita Renee.
Join us as we gain new awareness of our personal experience
and the experiences of others.
You know it. So that together we can build our capacity, bring it into the relationships we have,
work lives,
yes, and the community.
Let's go.
Hey listeners, when you're talking to someone, coworker, loved one, family member at a party, and they share an experience that's different than yours, and I'm going to break it down a little further. They share a non-normalized dominant experience. So let's say I'm able-bodied and I'm talking to someone and they share, they're a person with a disability and they're sharing their experience. What feelings do you have, if any? Come on in, let's talk about it.
These questions are always so fire. I love it. Okay, but Jody girl, now you gotta talk to me. What do you mean? Right? Like, I listen to people's experiences all day.
That's what you do.
But I can't say that I have feelings about it.
Right.
So talk to me.
Well, and I'm going to hit that right away with listeners. Sometimes we're not even aware that we're having feelings.
Right.
So, I learn and teach best through story.
Yeah.
So I was in Oklahoma and I was presenting and I was doing the right-handed, left-handed example, right? And a woman raised her hand and she goes, Jody, 300 and some people die a year in America because they're left-handed, right? And right-handed people, we're all like this, woo, right? Because she just gave us an experience that's way outside of our experience. So we're like this. And I'm looking around, I'm like looking at other right-handed people going, are we killing left-handed folks? Because I have not read about it on Facebook, right? And then she proceeds, so I crack a joke, right? Yeah. And then she proceeds to tell us because manufacturing equipment and power tools are all made for right-handed people. So they put the safety guard in the factories. The safety guard is on, assuming you're going to use that as a right-handed person. Yes. But if you use it as a left-handed person, you actually put yourself in harm's way. So when she said that, I'm immediately, now she's, okay, then I can relate back to my experience. I'm like, oh yeah, growing up out in the rural, my cousin who's left-handed, the chainsaw didn't work. You know what I mean? I'm like, right. And so then as she's saying this, right-handed people are like, oh. Then another woman raises her hand and she goes, well, Jody, she goes, this is why I'm done. I won't start my lawnmower anymore. And again, I go, well, because she's left-handed. So I said, will you help me understand? I don't have this experience. And she goes, well, my left hand is where my power is. So I want to pull from my left hand. But she goes, I have to step in between the handlebars, on my lawnmower. I have to, with my right hand, hold down the safety, and then I pull. And she goes, now because I'm coming over the top like this, she said, my whole life when I pull to start the lawnmower, it always would go up a little bit, a couple inches off the ground. She goes, no big deal, that's how it was. But she goes, on this particular day, she goes, I don't know if I had an extra big sweatshirt on or if I was leaned over more or it was a combination of both. But when I pulled and the lawnmower came up, it engaged, but it caught my sweatshirt. And she goes, and it sucked me right down to the ground with it. And she goes, I would have been severely hurt, but luckily when I got sucked down to the ground, my right hand let go of the safety handle and it disengaged. But she goes, my sweatshirt was tied up in the lawnmower and I was on the ground. And so when she said that, everybody, all right-handed people, we were like, what? In that moment, looking back on it now, not at the time because I had used humor, right, to alleviate it, but looking back when I hit the pause button, I had feelings. I had feelings of guilt for not knowing that. I had feelings of just being shocked because it was so outside my experience. And so what happens and what we want listeners, here's the first tool to be aware of, is that as we gain awareness, it is going to evoke emotions. We are going to have feelings. So as we hear about people's experience that are outside of our experience, it's going to evoke emotions. And so that's tool number one. It's going to evoke emotions, right? And the tool number two, though, is not to take action right away. So tool number 2 is we have to process the emotions. Because if you listen to my story, I alleviated the feelings by making a joke, which you know me, that's what I tend to do, right? And sometimes I'm using humor for humor's sake. Sometimes it is to alleviate it, but sometimes it's alleviated so that I don't ever have to come back to the feeling, right? It's just like, let's leave it, move it on. Sometimes when we hear someone's story that is outside of our experience, we immediately want to label it.
Oh, definitely.
We immediately want to go. So I've talked about in the book, and we've talked about the different ages. The different age groups experience things very differently. And so when, for example, I'm a Gen X, and as Gen X, we're kind of notorious for not having feelings, right? Well, we think we don't have feelings. We were told not to have feelings as Gen X. We were supposed to be seen but not heard. And don't you love, I grew up with, if you even thought of crying, like your face even started to pout up, you heard, I will give you something to cry about, which meant your feeling isn't legit. So to tap into my feelings is kind of hard, hence why I use humor. Right.
Okay.
But the younger generation.
Now I know.
Yes. Now, the younger generation. My oldest daughter, she's a millennial, right? And for listeners, my oldest is 30, and my youngest is like 7, because I thought let's take advantage of all the reproductive years. Woo, right. So my oldest is a millennial, and she's used to talking about her feelings, right? She's used, and like that's where she leads from, is her feelings. Which for me, in my experience of the societal system, because of my triangle, I'm like, oh Lord, right? So sometimes when she's talking about her feelings, I want to label it. Oh, this young generation, my gosh, if it doesn't feel good, they ain't gonna do it, and I want to label them soft, or I want to start.
Wow.
But what's in that is judgment, and what I'm doing is I'm not processing the feelings. So when I hear my daughter's stories, they bring up feelings, but rather than process those feelings, I like to label. And so we want to be aware that as we gain awareness and as we hear about other people's experiences, it's going to evoke feelings. And then the second thing is we don't want our feelings to be the lead of our actions. Okay, now I see your face. You got thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, capacity builders. I don't know if y'all caught her talking about a chainsaw when she was growing up. Like that was funny to me because I could see you with a chainsaw. It's like, girl, a kid. That was funny.
But you were stuck back at the chainsaw. I thought you were going to bring some. I thought she was going to be all deep and insightful, but she's stuck on me and a chainsaw.
That was funny. Now. But listen, like that really.
I was wearing Carhartt before it was cool. Now I just happen to be fashionable. Yes.
What came to mind though, because when I mentioned like I didn't think that I had feelings, or like I didn't think that I paid attention to that, right? Because you mentioned that. It's not something that we maybe notice at first. At all. And what brought it up for me is that, being a Black woman, leading a Black organization that works with primarily American Black girls, we have worked with Somalian babies, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking back to a time when we were at the school working with some Somalian girls, and in the conversations, in the beginning where we're trying to figure out, okay, like what are their challenges? What would you like to see us help them with or coach them on? And a lot of the teachers were saying that they were like sleeping in class and not turning in work. And so my first thoughts were, well, they're lazy probably, and I labeled them, right? And then it went to and probably unfocused because they're trying to figure out, how do they, fit into American culture standards for teens, right? And it wasn't until the first session with the girls that I had to totally change up my coaching curriculum, because now I have to pause, right? Because I caught myself, like when I went home that evening, it was like, I can't do the same thing that these teachers are doing. Yeah. Right. So I had to press the pause button, come back with a different curriculum that really started with pausing to ask questions. Right.
And I know you are always listening to understand.
Man, I wanted to understand.
So not that listen to respond, which we often will do. It's like, I'm going to ask a question, but really, I don't care what you say as an answer. I'm going to just move to the next thing.
I literally had to listen because I might not even have the answers. Right. Like I might not even been able to have the coaching that was for that, for those particular babies, right? Because their experience is different from mine. And so the Smiling babies, they broke it down for me, and I ended up having building my capacity and having this wonderful exchange with them around like what their challenges were, which one was the language barriers,
Yes.
right? Not just at school, but also trying to take that information back home to share with their parents. And number two was like their parents, the parents had a language barrier, but also the parents had other stuff, right? Like they're trying to figure out how to figure out housing, how to figure out making sure that there was an income to feed the babies, you know, and these are not just single parent homes. These are families, right? Mom and dad is in the home.
Yes.
And the babies basically said that when they get to school, that they really were challenged with feeling alone, like, because, you know, now they're having to kind of figure it out by themselves. And these teachers are then looking, instead of trying to hear them, you know, it's more of like, well, they're not handed it in because of whatever their things were. Yeah. Right. So it was just one. And when they told me, I remember going into savior mode for a minute, like, oh, I'm about to go and tell these teachers. But I had to pause on that too and really ask them again, what do y'all feel y'all need in order to get some support? And it may not come from me, but I can now become an advocate for that, you know?
And this, what guys, is why I love Miss Nita right here. Okay. Like she just role modeled all of it. So I hear you saying, I'm going to recap, I'm going to just use all these tools because this is so relatable because we all do this, is you're hearing a concern that the teachers have. And we're going to do a whole season on education.
Ooh,
we love
wait.
teachers. I mean,
I can't
so
wait.
teachers, you know, they're seeing students that are disengaged. So they're getting frustrated, right? So then they start to, we all do it. It's not a beat up on teachers thing.
No.
They labeled it. Because again, when we have feelings, they have feelings, I'm sure, of frustration or, you know, other feelings than, well, these kids, they're a bit lazy, and they share it with you, and you start to pick that up and like start to go, oh my, label it too.
Yes.
And
it was quick.
Yeah, so fast. We would label each other. And it's almost, it's almost, I was going to say fun, but it's like, oh, when we label something and we both agree, oh, well, they're just lazy or they're just whatever. Then we co-signed. Now we don't have to process.
We don't
our
have to process it.
And we exhale.
Exactly.
And what
on to the next.
Right. But what we just did, and we didn't even wear it, we limited our capacity.
Oh my gosh.
So think about
you talked about that before, like contracting and expanding. That definitely was a contraction. Yeah.
So how many times, listeners, do we do this at work? We hang out with people or in our family, or we're even asking our spouses to co-sign. Like I saw this experience. It's different than mine. I want to judge and label it. I want you to co-sign, because then what we're subtly saying is because then our experience is the right way and that's the wrong way, right? Because we labeled it. And then we don't have to do any work for ourselves, and we can but what happens then is we won't be as warm or want to work with that experience. So we are limiting our capacity. You know, rather we, like you said, you hit the pause button and said, oh, wait a second, I'm labeling. I don't want to go down that. Now, I didn't hear you necessarily process all your emotions, but
I'm glad you said that, because I'm over here thinking like it wasn't an overnight thing.
No.
Right? Like we had a couple months or like 3 months to work with these girls. And so it was a process. Right? It was talk to them, go home, unpack. Yeah. Process, go home, unpack. Right? Like it was work.
A lot of work. And that's why it's easier just to get a cosign. It'd be so much easier if Nita would call me up and go, girl, these girls are doing blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, oh, they just lazy. They just need to adapt. And then we'd be done.
Oh, that adapt. Yes.
But we don't allow we try not to, we're trying to always build our capacity. So I'd be like, okay, let's talk to you. Sounds like you're frustrated. Let's process this out. You know, what it's about. So the tool that we're going to eventually give in our next episode about how to process our emotions. Oh, I can't wait for you to apply it in the scenario.
I know.
But I love you're using all the little tools. Is, you know, you heard this different experience, you were labeling it, you hit the pause button, you went home, you processed, then you came back and you changed your style so that you could listen to the girls to understand their experience.
Absolutely.
And not listen to respond. And how many of us, I know we do that. And if you're a parent out there, when we parent, how many times do we listen to respond? Like when I talk to my kids, there's sometimes I can hold the space, I have big capacity, and I'm like, okay, child, I don't understand what you were thinking in a situation. Like, help me understand. And I just want to absorb it. But that's on my bestest days of parenting. And those are a little less frequent than the not so bestest days, right? On my not so great days of parenting, I am listening respond.
With what?
Right. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, so what were you thinking? And in my head, I'm like, I don't even care what you were thinking. You should have done this, this, and this.
Exactly.
Like, so whatever they say, I'm like, well, you should have done this, this, and this. Now, if you're in a romantic relationship, this will put us through the roof, right? When your spouse is listening to respond rather than listening to understand, it's just like, did you hear anything I just said? And you're right. And then you just,
you didn't hear anything that I said.
And then both parties just restrict, and now we just got this because now I'm on limited capacity and you're limited, and we're just yes. And so what I loved is you went back to those young girls.
Girl, you're so excited. Slow down for me.
I know. I do that, right?
Well, I know it's so good.
The listeners are like, the listeners are out there going, "Thank you, Miss Nita. Thank you, Nita. Thank you," because that girl talked too fast, right? So you hit that pause button, you caught yourself, and she's still labeled, like we all do it. So that's the other thing I want people, let the fences drop. We're in the societal system. We do this stuff, you know.
L-I-G.
Yes, and I've called Miss Nita before and go, girl, this isn't a capacity building moment. This is just a complain session, and I just want to label and complain for a second, you know. But I love our relationship because she'll let me do it. But she'll come back if I don't come back first and say, hey, I processed it. You know, she'll come back and go, hey, remember that complaint section? Have you gotten that out of your system? Are you processing it?
I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, I also want our capacity builders to understand, like, what we're doing this show because we have been doing this work. So my organization have been working with urgency of awareness for a while. So as I'm able to use the language, right, like pause, or, you know, you push the pause button or some of the other language because we've been doing the work.
Yes.
Yeah. Just want to make sure to bring it back to like the urgency of awareness has been the reason why I'm able to catch myself. Right.
Oh, thank you. It is a shout out. Woohoo. and so then you came to listen to understand, and then they gave you new insight. And turns out, oh my gosh, the label I wanted to put on these young ladies is not at all accurate. You know, and that's what then broadens and builds our capacity. Yes. I also liked what you said, and here's listeners. So here's another question for you, because the tool is when we have feelings, number one, we got to be aware of them. Like I like what you said in the beginning. You're like, I'm not even sure I was aware of those feelings. Yeah. And for some of us, because of our triangle identities, we weren't encouraged to have feelings. Some of us, we were encouraged. Like my daughter, she was encouraged to have feelings, and she can name her feelings very, very quickly and readily. I, on the other hand, my experience as a Gen X, I grew up in poverty, and in poverty, that triangle too, it's limited on feelings. In poverty, you can only have two feelings. You can be mad or you can be happy. But you can technically be sad, but you can only be sad for so long because then you're vulnerable. I mean, if you're too sad for too long, that makes you vulnerable.
Get it together.
And so I always say this. I always say myself, I am happy till I'm not. Right? Like I have two primary emotions, happy, and then when I'm not, it's like,
I promise you that's me. That's why we get along
exactly.
so well.
Then it's like, okay, we're over here now. And so realizing that the identities in our blanket of life, they impact how much we might even be aware to notice our feelings.
You know, I love that blanket of life.
I know. Yeah, because you think James Brown all the time. Yes. So number one, as we're on this journey together and we gain awareness is going to evoke emotion. And number one, we got to start to become aware, what emotions are we having? And then we want to not take action out of those feelings. And action shows up in different ways. Like when I was in Oklahoma, I had feelings and I used humor to alleviate the feeling. You said, you know, you had some feelings. Once you got some understanding, you wanted right away help.
I wanted to save them.
And so, we wanted to save them, right? And then the helping field, we do that. Oh my gosh, okay, now I have we got a little bit of knowledge. You know what they say, a little is dangerous. And then we're like, oh, well, then we want to help. And what we unintentionally do is we almost take over. Yeah. And that person never asked for all that help. They just wanted to be listened to and just like hear my experience.
You're doing too much, Miss Nita.
Right. Yes. You're taking over now. And so I call this what we do is we take our blanket of life and we'll smother people out. Oh, now that I understand a little bit of your perspective, I'll take care of that. And so I always say this, Minnesota, because we're up here coming to you from Minnesota, and if you don't know the Midwest, we have a thing, of guilt. Minnesotans, Midwesterns get real guilt ridden. And so when I do the right-handed, left-handed activity and a good right-handed Midwesterner hears that they got a benefit that they did not work for, they start doing this. Oh, I'm so sorry, left-handed people. I didn't know about the scissors. We'll get it fixed for you. And I'm always like, no, they're having a feeling. They're feeling bad. So they want to take action and save. So you don't want to, so our action, when we have a feeling, we might use humor. We might want to go and help. We might want to deny and double down on our experience. Oh, and we've done that. Like sometimes I've done that with my daughter, who's a millennial. Girl, you ain't got it bad. I'll tell you about bad. So I want to take action by defending and making less of her story. And so we don't want to, when we get those feelings, we want to become aware of them, but we don't want to take action. We want to process that feeling first. Process that feeling first. And we're going to give you a tool in the next episode. We're going to dedicate a tool just for processing feelings.
I love that.
Because it takes so much practice.
It does.
It makes so much, takes so much practice.
It does.
But for today, the question I have then is I want our audience to reflect when we're hearing someone's experience that's different than ours.
Okay.
And especially if we're holding normalized dominant and we're hearing from someone who isn't normalized dominant, because sometimes that's kind of more jarring because we just even haven't thought of it before. What feelings are happening? And I always ask, I want audience members, we hold feelings in our body. And so the more I start to become aware of my feelings, the more I can actually my stomach will flip. So that's an indicator. So if I'm in a meeting and somebody's talking and my stomach flips, like now, before I never would have noticed it, but now it's like, oh, okay, that's my indicator that I'm having some feelings. So even checking with our body, how does your body show up when it has feelings, right? And if we don't check in, how does your body show up later? Because I know this, when I get to the airport, many times I'm traveling, and I get on the plane and I'm like, oh man, my shoulder is so sore. I used to just do that. Oh man, my shoulder is so sore. Now what I'll do is I'll be like, wait a second. What was my feelings today? Is there anything that I was feeling that I held on to and I didn't process? And 9 times out of 10, it is. Sometimes it's, I just slept wrong. But a lot of times when my body is talking to me, I listen more. And then I like, okay, did I have any feelings or something go on today that I haven't processed? Because sometimes that's our body holding it. And so audience members, we want to start to just become aware when we're hearing experiences that are outside of ours. What feelings are we having? How's our body trying to let us know we're having those feelings? And then are we creating spaces with our loved ones or with our coworkers so that we can start to process those feelings rather than immediately take action? Because we'll take action so quickly by labeling it or by trying to help or by using humor so to alleviate the feeling and just move on. But ultimately, if we want to build our capacity, I need to process that feeling and where it is coming from.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it because as you're saying that, I know as I've been doing the work, there's 2 spaces that my stomach, it's almost, I'm glad that you brought up the stomach part, right?
Yes.
Like the flip,
Yes.
because I think that those are the things that we're not taught, right? Like in my body, I definitely, it's not a stomach flip, but it's like a overall chill, like
Yes.
that when an example would be when I'm in white spaces.
Yes.
And someone may say something about like an example would be for me personally is when somebody who has the capacity to help Black people here tell me a situation where they've gone across seas to help. My body literally like gets this chill and it's like I get real quiet.
Because you got a whole bunch of feelings happening.
Because I got a whole bunch of feelings happening and I'm not able to express what those feelings are
right
in the moment.
Yep.
But I know that it just doesn't feel good.
Yes.
It doesn't feel, and I know I better not respond.
Right. Because we can also respond in anger. Okay. And violence, that is a response to feelings too. Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
And the other space is in my personal male-female relationship. So as I'm dating, there'll be times when things will be going good. And then he'll say, like the person will say something and I'll get that same feeling and I'll sit with it. And as I've been doing the work more and more, I'm noticing that as I unpack it, it comes from my upbringing.
Yes.
Right. Like
so
being able to, and then be like, oh, so it's not him. It's me. And I have to understand, okay, so that's not his thing. Like, I need to sit with that. And like you said, honor the feeling, like go back into that space. Like, what was it? Yes. And then decide on what am I going to do with that now, since it's no longer me. Because a lot of it was also from survival modes.
Absolutely.
That I'm no longer in survival mode. So I don't need that when it's my personal home space.
Right.
So I'm glad that you brought that up.
How we were brought up affects our relationships. Now, if you are relating to what Miss Nita's talking about, the next episode you want to tune into, because the whole episode is dedicated to a tool to help us process it. And I want to leave with listeners on this. Are you creating a space with your loved ones, whether romantic, whether coworkers, whether, extended family? Are you creating a space where we can start to, it's okay to name a feeling, or it's okay to say, okay, hey, my stomach is flipping, I need to hit the pause button. Are we judging that person when they say that? Are we giving them time to process?
Literally. And that's the word. Right. Ooh, that felt good to talk about. Like, I'm glad you named the feeling. Like, because we don't get that. We don't stomach flip.
And then what happens again is, that reaction, contraction, and all of a sudden you have all this friction. Whereas if we'd hit that pause button and realize we're having feelings and not take action right away, but do our work, internalize and process those feelings, which we're going to talk about next episode, how to do that, then our capacity broadens and I can show up, whether it's a coworker or a loved one, better able to communicate how I'm feeling, because now I've identified it. And tell them, hey, this is the action I want to take, or maybe even this is the action I took, but here's why, not justifying it, just,
Exactly.
And then being able to listen, to understand, how was that for you? And when we do that with each other, that's when we're operating out of our full capacity and we're holding space for each other.
Yeah, that's the building capacity.
Jody,
we did it. We did it. That was good.
Just take us out of here.
That was good.
I hope listeners join next time. I love the tool we're doing next episode.
Man, you don't want to miss it, and as we close, as per usual, this is us building capacity, y'all. I mean, literally building capacity. We're building capacity within ourselves, within our community, and within our institutions. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to spend it with us, and we so appreciate you. Join us for the next one. We'll see you soon.